Time to get on to Marvel Project number 2. Could they make it 2 out of 2? Could it be a rare full week win for the MCU in this, as we said before, time of crisis for the studio? We spoke last week about how kind of in the wake of the MCU Variety article, there would be a lot of kind of agenda-based reviews that would slate the Marvels no matter what happened. And look, that's happening. Business is down. And again, the early indications as well suggest that this is in line to be the lowest ever opening to an MCU movie. But look, that's not what we're here to discuss. We're not here to analyze the business of Marvel. We're here to analyze the content and whether we enjoyed it or not. And Dan and I, very similar people, two peas in a pod, evidenced by the fact that we literally ended up, like, we've obviously got the same Marvel traditions. You know, when there's a new Marvel movie out, you got to make sure you're sitting in a recliner, you're comfortable, you're enjoying it, you have all your treats around you, you do it the fucking right way, to the point that we ended up, without discussing it, in the exact same screening, in the exact same row yesterday, watching the Marvels. But Dan, the big question that we have to get to, and we'll just get to it right up top, aside from all the kind of hype and discussion around the movie, the Marvels itself, what did you think? Was it actually any good, or was it, were the critics' worries correct?
The critics' worries were not correct.
Hey.
The Marvels was a surprisingly good film. Now, we're not talking, Godfather or the original Star Wars or anything like that. This was a fun, family-orientated film that what it did quite well. Like, there's a few criticism I have, but you have to nitpick at stuff like this. But I went into the Marvels expecting pretty much the worst elements of Captain Marvel, of Ms. Marvel, and a character that it's still lacking some development in Monica Rambeau that we've seen come out of WandaVision. So I was a bit pessimistic, and I think that was very much due to the negative air that's surrounding the whole comic book movie franchise right now, which you can't avoid. And I have to say, just to make this point, I have never in the last 20 years seen a magazine article discussed as much as the Variety article was this week. Every single day in work, I was dealing with a customer who, like, because maybe I wear like comic book t-shirts all the time, well, have you read the Variety article? Or the Variety article told me that Marvel's dying. Or even my colleagues were discussing it. One of the guys I work very closely with, very impassioned. He's a former Disney employee, and he went off on a 5-minute tangent about how it's done, But I said this to you, and this is something that I felt immediately coming out after it, is that in a weird way, I kind of do hope this movie flops. I hope it doesn't make the money they're predicting, because it's actually quite good. And it's the same thing with Solo. There's two reasons I want this to happen with a movie of this standard. One is because it might wake the fans back up into being so presumptuous with the content. Just say, right, no, this is going to be crap. I'm not going to see it. And I'm not supporting everything that comes out after it. The other thing is, even though this content is good, it might reinvigorate Marvel Studios. Say, the content's good, that's cool, but for us to actually turn a profit, which is the primary concern we have here, it needs to be great, not just acceptable. The Marvels was just a very fun movie, and it didn't take any prisoners. It took place exactly where we thought it would, the exact moment that Miss Marvel ended, and it threw us into top gear straight off the bat with some very effective, very exciting, very well constructed action scenes. That action scene in the first part of the movie shouldn't have been as easy to follow as it was, and that in itself was an accomplishment. May have dipped towards the end. We may have felt like a little bit rushed in some elements. However, if you're thinking about going to see the Marvels and you're on the cusp, go see the Marvels. Expect a very mediocre action movie, and you'll come out quite happy.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. And I think that's what we went into it. Like, we're not expecting this to be Endgame or anything that we discussed kind of in that perspective. And it wasn't, like, and it's not perfect, and it's not beyond criticism either. Okay. But with the lowered expectations that we came in, this movie had no right to be as much fun as it was. I
Exactly.
really enjoyed it. It was just, it brought, and it went back to basics. It's like, let's just be funny. Let's just have the crack. I love the focus on, and again, like, and I tweeted about this during the week where I'm like, Miss Marvels. And again, literally in our Loki discussion, I said, that like Miss Marvels is well-intentioned shite. But like the problem with it wasn't the concept, like the highlight of Miss Marvel, and the reason that it frustrates me as a show is because they had something so good. Kamala is phenomenal, like Iman Vellai just living her life as a teenage fan of Marvel, and an audience avatar in that sense is fantastic. And the Khan family and the dynamic, they've cast them so well and they script them so well and they really understand what it's like to be the Khan family and they really get that. But they just lost their way halfway through. But the fact that they retained that for this movie just gave it a likable kind of grounded element that I feel sometimes like Captain Marvel can miss out on, because again, Captain Marvel, like I think I liked the original, but since we've seen Carol in any, she has, because she's so powerful, you can't relate to her, you can't kind of get in under the skin, but also and Monica Rambeau, like you say, just isn't someone who's been that well established, even though we have to fill in the blanks of her backstory ourselves. But everything worked, like having the Khans just grounded everyone else. And then that allowed the drama between Carol and Monica to really flow and be ground. And this movie was so much better for just being a character-based movie. It was very funny. Like I loved the bit where it was like, stop running and let the flurkins eat you. It'll be okay. That was a phenomenal scene. That was genuinely laugh out. Like, you probably heard me laughing. And it was like, it was genuinely like one of the biggest laugh out loud scenes I've had in Marvel in recent years. The action, like you said, the fight choreography was excellent, so well edited, so well directed. And again, I looked at it and it was one of the sticks that I was ready to beat them with based on what I'd seen in the trailer. I'm like, I think this is going to be muck. I don't think it's going to work. It worked brilliantly. Like whether they wanted it for comedy, when they kind of had that moment of, hang on, we can use these powers and we can figure it out and we can plan around this. It really, really made this movie seem fresh. There was a bit in the middle where it kind of got into just a lot that like cursory point where it's like a lot of exposition happens and everyone's just stating their motivation, so you understand what like is at stake for the last third. That's just a necessary evil of comic book movies. And why I'd say, like, look, this is probably, if I'm ranking this in the Marvel movie kind of rankings, I'm saying this is probably around the middle, but it's around the middle of movies that I really like, you know what I mean? So I'd enjoyed it. I enjoyed this. I'll watch it again. I'll probably go see it again in the cinema because I want to just watch it as a fan. And yeah, I think this is a sneaky triumph for Marvel. And again, I totally hear what you're saying in terms about wanting it to be a flop. I don't have the trust in the Disney Marvel brain trust to say that if this is a flop, they'll learn the right lessons. I hear what you're saying, and they could. But I've also seen that happen with Star Wars, where they're like, right, let's never make another movie again for 50 bajillion years, you know, and let's just make constant TV shows and let's just do that. Like Disney can learn the wrong lessons a lot. So I hope that this gets word of mouth, and I really hope that within the fan base it ignites that discussion of, no, this is actually good. Like, stop, you're just, and it is coming across every time I hear it. I'm like, every time I'm seeing reviews, like even they had one on Today FM there yesterday, and they're like, another Marvel disgrace, and it's like, you haven't watched the movie. Like, you either haven't watched the movie, and here's what I'd say, right? It's really good if you like these kind of movies, okay? If you're the type of person who is predisposed to hating these movies, and even the movies that like you liked it, that Marvel or like even comic book style movies that you've liked, you have to be like, no, I don't usually like this kind of movie. Basically, if you're the type of fan who, as soon as Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon came out, were like, these are absolute masterpieces, and like you agree with Martin Scorsese's criticism of Marvel that they're more like theme park ride, you won't like this movie. It's very comic booky, and that's fine. It's fine if other people don't like it, but at least realize your biases here. if you like these kind of movies, and if you're listening to this, chances are you very much do. You will like you. There's a very good chance you'll like this movie. There's a lot to like about it. Well, it's not perfect. It doesn't really. Well, it actually does change a lot in the Marvel universe. So we'll get to that in a second.
Yes.
But the story itself, is kind of just like middle of the road. It's fine. It's nice. But it worked, and it knew what it was and what it was trying to be, and it knew what it wasn't trying to be. I liked the fact that it wasn't like existence itself. Like, obviously, look, there was an existential threat. That's part of any comic book story. That's why they've got the superpowers, and it's not just a routine cop story. But like, it wasn't trying to say that, like, it wasn't trying to have end game level stakes. It just knew what it was, and it worked for what it was. We had, obviously, in the lead roles, we had Brie Larson, Tavona Paris, and Iman Vellai come together as a super team. Obviously, very different characters, very different actresses. There's no way that that's going to be a guaranteed win. But of the three, I think we can agree they worked based off our initial thoughts. But like, of the three, who did you feel was the MVP of this movie?
I think it's like safe to say it was really Kamala,
Yeah.
because what this movie did, which I think is a triumph in and of itself, is that it elevated these three main characters to a higher status. I mean, I like these characters a lot more than I went in. I've mentioned in the past when they brought Kamala Khan into the comics, I hated the way they were writing her. It was all like the kind of slang at the time was shifting into what it is now, and there was a lot of words that just had been basically invented due to the internet that Kamala was communicating to these older superheroes in primarily, and it frustrated me. It was really, really annoying because I'd seen these kids talking like this on the internet, and now I have to deal with one of these characters talking this way in the comic book. And she was much more palatable than in Miss Marvel, and I really liked the casting. And like you said, the first half of that series, I really liked what they were trying to do. In this movie, I actually left the cinema really enjoying the character and wanting to see more of her. I thought she was absolutely brilliant, and this is the character that she should have been before, not just in the series, but in the comics, and I would have found her very entertaining. Monica Rambeau got her depth that she needed. She pretty much was just a MacGuffin in WandaVision, essentially. She was helping forward the story, and apart from that, we didn't see proper development in her, only in her powers, but not in her character. And the triumph of all triumphs, you forget Brie Larson is a pain in the arse, and you actually enjoy seeing her on screen. I mean, I don't know her personally, but we've all seen those interviews, and when someone like that, like, your Katherine Heigl sort of syndrome, when someone is just so narcissistic and just embittered and that radiates from your interviews, and it can affect your enjoyment. And that was one of the things about Endgame. They put a very unusual level of criticism on. I was like, oh god, here's Brie Larson to ruin everything, and you just don't like her, but she was actually quite enjoyable when she was on screen in this. And I don't know if it's the fact that she's a talented actor or not, but she seemed quite humbled. So for an undeveloped character, an unlikable character, and a decent character played by an unlikable person to actually go, I really enjoyed all three of their performances. That's a pretty solid feat to hit.
I want to touch on Brie Larson because I think I feel a bit more sympathetic towards her. I don't think she's handled it in the best way, but I do sympathize with where she's coming from. She got the toxic incel reaction. She got the full brunt of Marvel's Gamergate moment where it's like, women can't be heroes. And she got that. And she reacted in a way which she should have been a bit more stage managed. She shouldn't have came out swinging. She is someone who is becoming a bona fide Hollywood superstar, and she's a really talented actress. But like, coming out aggressively against the fan base, you're just setting up a toxic. What did you expect was going to happen here? Do you know what I mean? So she hasn't helped the situation. But I do like her as Captain Marvel. I do like her as an actress, and I just think she's someone. Rather than judging her, I think I judge more. She found herself in a difficult situation and she mismanaged it. So I'm a bit more sympathetic towards her, and I've liked her in everything I've seen her in so far. Even like in the bit she was in an Endgame, where it's like, "Hey, Peter Parker," she's just really likable in her line delivery and stuff like that. Yeah, I agree. I really liked all of them. I thought they nailed it. With Monica still being the most in need of development, but it looks like we may get that, and she may get her time to shine. I liked how this movie kind of orbited around Carol and gave us a full 360 moment. Like, she's Kamala's hero. She's trying to mend fences with Monica. She's the annihilator to the Kree. I thought that took in all aspects of her personality, and it was a really interesting character study. I think in her power scale is as such that in any scenario, she probably should be the central character, for better or for worse. Just Captain Marvel is just so overwhelmingly the star, like, you know what I mean, the star player, like, even in fiction, even fictionally, that I like that 360 view of her and how everyone bounced off her, and how actually they used her relationship with everyone involved in this movie, all the major characters, to make it work together. I think actually what may have worked better, and again, I'm totally speculating here, maybe interviews now that she's allowed to give them will kind of shed some light. I did feel what you're feeling there. There was more of an impassioned performance here, and she seemed more bought in. Maybe having Nia DaCosta there as kind of a female director and running it may have kind of eased that up and kind of brought her in. Like, it's the same, like, and look at it. It's like, you've worked in art before. We both worked in wrestling and stuff. If someone's feeling quite toxic towards a situation or something like that, you go, okay, forget about the situation, let's just focus on having a great match, you know, and that's how you get them back in. And that could have been the atmosphere that was fostered here, because this felt like a movie where everyone involved, like, loved being on it, was having a load of fun. I agree though, Kamala is the star here. She is the audience avatar for all of us as the Marvel super fan, and the fact that she, like, has that passion for Marvel in real life. As we said last week when we were discussing this, she's gone out and written comics of Miss Marvel again, and kind of changed up a lot of the character as well in her image, and she genuinely loves this stuff, and I feel that passion just shines through in her performances, and it's really, and again, with the background that we've kind of discussed, I feel it really it's needed now. We need someone in this world to be Marvel is deadly, and I love it. Because, you know, we want to be fans of this. We want to like all this stuff. So I feel it was a really good coming out moment, and I'm delighted for her, because she just seems like a ray of sunshine, both on screen and off screen, and even interviews she does as well. So delighted for her, and I feel this was a triumph. Of course, the one project we haven't discussed this coming off the back of, which technically was connected, and a lot of the factors were here, but we just don't like to talk about it that much because we spent 6 weeks wasting our life talking about it anyway. Secret Invasion, which, like we said, we both hated. But there was obviously some reservations here, with Samuel L. Jackson back as Nick Fury, as well as it kind of being a continuance of the ending of that with the Kree and the Skrull kind of shaky peace treaty, but how do you think these worked in the movie? Because again, that was something that I guess would have been a threat, bringing those elements that didn't work at all in that show into this movie. Do you felt that the movie managed to overcome it, or kind of dragged it down, or what were your thoughts?
I feel like the movie kind of ignored it completely. Obviously, if Secret Wars, for the betterment of the continuation of the Marvel universe, if it just showed Nick Fury going up on that lift, that would have been a better series than anything we needed, because that was the only thing we needed to bring it to this point. We were already well aware of the Skrulls, and a Secret Invasion just, like, that's the problem I have with it. It was a bad show, yes, but worse of a crime is that it just did nothing. It was nice to see Nick Fury back where the character Nick Fury should be, which is, you know, at the helm of a very powerful organization. The way they just had him, you know, in the background as like a nomad style agent, not the character nomad, but just the actual, like, nomadic secret agent who'd been betrayed by his country, you know, these tropes to play out a million times. It never worked with Nick Fury in the comics. They always did this storyline in times where Marvel was struggling. And I'm not saying that was connected, but it just doesn't work for a character like Nick Fury. And now that he's helming Saber, it felt like that they just were doing what the character was there to do the whole time. That he's this unapologetic, never answer to anyone, takes no bullshit character, and he's the guy who's just this shit. He's essentially Charlie and Charlie's Angels. He's not the angry precinct cop. I can't believe you guys went like lone gun on me again. That's not who Nick Fury is. What he was in this movie is what Nick Fury should always be, especially the MCU iteration, not the David Hasselhoff version that we have in the comics. So I was really happy to see him here, essentially forgetting that the events of Secret Invasion happened. He's just business as usual.
Yeah, I agree. It was a return to form, and again, kind of Nick Fury, as far as this story and universe has gone, is he's fulfilled his major role. You know, he was the guy who brought the Avengers together. You know, that's done, and he's kind of like he's on the retirement phase. He's on the last leg of his tour here. So I do enjoy getting to see him kick back and just be charismatic and be more of a background character, because yeah, you've got that Sam Jackson like just energy that he brings when you just cut loose. I thought he got to cut loose here by having the focus be on the other characters, and I felt that that's what Secret Invasion that's what didn't work about it. By making Sam Jackson the main character, you had to get dramatic Sam Jackson, you had to get this, and you're like, that's not what we want from this version of Nick Fury. Whereas this was brilliant. There was a couple of amazing line readings as well, where like Monica learned how to fly, and he's like, yeah, black girl magic. Or then when like, I think this is like, I think this is the same sequence, but at the end of it, where Kamala's flying back down to Earth, and everyone's like, oh no, and then they switch to Carol, and he's like, oh, that's cool, it's just Carol. Like,
I know it's not Nick Fury, it is just Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, and we love him, so like, why not? And it's like, ultimately, like, again, Nick Fury is a character. If he had died by now, it wouldn't have made much of a difference probably to what's going ahead, because his existence is to bring the Avengers together, you know what I mean? And again, he ran Shields, but now they're kind of just giving him 5-letter companies to like run, beginning with S, just because they need to keep him involved, because he's that good as Samuel L. Jackson. So let him be Samuel L. Jackson if that's the case, and they did here, so it really worked. Nicole and the Screes, look, I'm kind of over it. I don't really care. Just give the Skrulls a home and get them off my TV screen, and then just go, yeah, Gaia doesn't have her powers anymore. She's actually not the strongest person in the MCU. That's all I want from the Skrull and the Kree right now. I'm done. You've told the story. You haven't told it well. Let's just forget this ever happened. It didn't
like let's forget
her
about Gaia, and just pretend like her powers just fizzled and she lost them. We don't even need to mention again. We don't even need this exposition. Let's forget it ever happens.
And I'm done with this story, if I'm being honest. Like, but again, it didn't harm it here. It was fine. They needed a bad guy. They needed MacGuffins. They needed all of that. But the movie got out of, like, they didn't get in the way in this movie. Do you know what I mean? They managed to be like, yeah, okay, we need a bad guy because we need to fight and we need to become a team, and that needs to be. But the movie realized that the drama and the tension in this was around the internal relationships between our 3 lead characters, and that they focused on that. So you didn't mind the fact that this story's played out and we've seen it and we're done with it. It also, what I liked about this movie, though, is that it gave us some really, really promising jumping off points. So we end the movie with Carol apparently just giving Monica's family home away to Kamala and the cans. Like, I'm like, are you not going to find her? And then where's she going to live? Like, it was just a bit strange. But like, then Kamala has her Nick Fury moment and meets Kate Bishop, which again, I just want to see a TV show with the two of those just having the crack. They're 2 brilliant additions to the MCU. But they're presumably setting up Young Avengers by the looks of things. They also mentioned Cassie Lang here. How do we think the Young Avengers is going to tie into the grand scheme of things? Like, are we going to say these are now, like, when we're looking at Avengers, Kang Dynasty, are these the Avengers we're discussing? Or do you feel that this is more a setup for phase 7 or 8, and these will be the Avengers then, and we may just get some other references and team building up to that? How do you, what's kind of your early speculation on that kind of?
My early speculation is this: that a teen team is going to be what a teen team almost is, and it's going to be a minor, like, threat level combatant. But all of these stories, as they played it in the comics, with Teen Team from Invincible, with the Teen Titans from Justice League, with the Young Avengers from the comics, and any others I may be missing, it's always been about like these minor threats, but proper internal struggle, character development, love interests. And I think that's what we're going to see here. I think we're going to see it. The Young Avengers could be a way to really get into each one of these characters individually and really define who they are and where they may be going forwards, maybe essentially as a segue into them becoming full-blown Avengers. Because we have seen some, like, Cassie Lang, we've seen her journey. We're quite aware of her character, even though in Quantum Mania I didn't really like just kind of how beige she was. And I really like the new iteration of Hawkeye, and Kamala is pretty strong. But we have to remember we've also got Scar, who is the son of Thor, who what character development he has. Here he is, done. Like, so we've got a lot to play with. We've seen, oh God, the character's name escapes me, the younger iteration of Captain America,
Yes.
who was in the Falcon Winter
Falcon
Soldier.
Winter Soldier. Yeah,
Yeah, that name it escapes me right now.
I'll find it.
And then, of course, it looks like we may have Wiccan returning because we know he's showing up in Agatha. So we have the setup for the Young Avengers here. And could the Young Avengers also tie into the Thunderbolts? You know, it might, like, it may be a team versus team dynamic is going to be pretty good because the more I look at where they're going with this story, is and you have to look at the comics for source material, is I think Secret Wars is going to be less Secret Wars and it's going to be more X-Men versus the Avengers. Which was a pretty decent comic, a pretty interesting album. I don't think you're gonna go with the exact storyline where half of the X-Men get the Phoenix Force and the Avengers are sent to stop them. And then, of course, the fallback from that was they did use that as a catalyst to rewrite a lot of the Marvel universe, especially with Uncanny Avengers and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think they're going to go to full blown 80s Secret Wars route. I mean, the one thing that we have to see in this is we need to see the alien symbiote Spider-Man done properly. I want to see Spider-Man with the symbiote at the end of the movie with no sign of any of the tropes that we know come along with it. And I want to see a Spider-Man movie where he's the full symbiote, and then maybe the third iteration we start getting into Venom stuff. Let's build Venom properly this time, for crying out loud. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here because I do see, yeah, the Young Avengers is just going to be what teens are, and it's just going to look at these characters the way you would have expected a Spider-Man story to go. It focuses on their real life and how they struggle with dealing with superheroes. And at the moment, that seems to be very in. We've got Gen V. Invincible is on its second season of its animated iteration. And I think that's going to be a very character-driven story. But are they going to take place with Avengers? I genuinely do not see that happening.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Being honest, I don't see it happening either. But like they're going to be comprised in. They're going to be a part of any big Avengers battle scene. Do you know what I mean? And ultimately, they're setting up like. Marvel are going to want to plan, no, they may not, but they're going to want to plan out like 20 years from now, who will our heroes be? And again, you don't see Thor being around, you don't see Doctor Strange being around, so eventually the Young Avengers just will be the Avengers, but just not anytime soon. Yeah, they're not nearly built up enough. So Thunderbolts is an interesting one. I hadn't thought of that. I like it. So yeah, we shall see, I suppose. We also speculated last week, and we're correct. Delighted with this, in saying that we get some X-Men teases, and fuck me, they just gave it to us. Wow, we got a lot here. We got Beast, who's played with Kelsey Grammer reprising his old role, to Monica, tending to Monica throughout. Well, we got a variant of Maria sitting over her but doesn't recognize her. Also, Beast mentions Charles Xavier. We got a riff of the X-Men team. They mentioned that she was rescued by Binary, who, fun fact, if you don't know, Binary in the comics is Carol Danvers' most powerful form, so potential variant there, or they can go a completely different direction. So let's just wildly speculate about how all this plays out. Are the X-Men now the X-Men are in the MCU now, aren't they? Like, this is it. They're here.
That's it. I mean, you could say we've had that since multiverse of madness, but was that just a little bit of fan service? Was that a nudge? We know it's coming. There's a lot of speculation. One of the unnamed movies is going to be the Marvel iteration, and we discussed it continuously during Low Key that the Deadpool movie is going to really kind of bring that in because Deadpool is in the MCU now. And Deadpool is part of the X family. Yes, X-Force more so, but X-Force does lead directly into the X-Men. But they're there. We've never seen an X-Man. And Charles Xavier, he's his own little entity. And he appeared as a member of the Illuminati, not as the X-Men, which is a comic book accurate team. Well, the one in the movie, it was they took some liberties with some characters. But yes, the X-Men, as we know and love them, are here. And the thing we really have to look at is that it is the Fox version of the X-Men. This is Kelsey Grammer, as he seemed to appear at the end of Days of Future Past. So like that stuff is kind of canon, the way the Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield Spider-Man is now canon of the MCU. Yes, it exists in an altered dimension, but there is that connection. So the ramifications here are huge. But I don't think this is the exact Fox universe. I think this is another variant where it's slightly different. Okay, people say because they went with traditional makeup for Beast, and now of course they're doing the very Marvel staple CG. But I think this is going to be less Fox universe, more comic book universe. And the reason why they say that is because of some of the little things in the background, like how Beast's uniform was. You could see the traditional X-Men pants underneath his lab coat, and the fact that Binary, even though it was not comic book accurate, had a very comic book inspired outfit. It was very colorful, very contrasting. So I do think this is a unique dimension, timeline, whatever you want to say, of the X-Men that we're going to see. It's one we're going to see going forward. But the ramifications now are huge. You know, this is it. The X-Men exist. Monica Rambeau's in an altered universe. They're going to try and send her home. This is going to be the connection. And I'm still holding out the Deadpool is going to probably be the most important midpoint story that we're going to see, and that's what's going to bring them all together.
Yeah. And do you know what? I'm very okay with them keeping the Fox casting, because again, if there's anyone that they need to recast or anything like that, they can just go variant, and that's fine too. And of course, we've already seen now, I know this was a fake out, but we were talking about WandaVision earlier. We've also seen Evan Peters, cast technically as Quicksilver, but also not. So again, like they this is something they're playing with, and why not do the fan service thing? So I'm a big fan of this. Exciting times. I cannot wait. And exciting times for Marvel. Like again, at the end of it, we've been talking about this all this series, where it's like, you know what, you can say what you want, but we're going to be here either way. We're going to be watching it. We're going to be loving it. And as far as I'm concerned, Dan, as fans of Marvel storylines, this has been a successful few weeks. In terms of 2023, we've had Quantumania. We've discussed it all, obviously, so we don't need to rehash our thoughts in each individual project, but we've had Quantumania, we've had Guardians, we've had Secret Invasion, now we've had Loki, we've had the Marvels. If you're looking at this as a Marvel fan, in a year, would you call this a win for Marvel, or how would you kind of be?
Wouldn't call it a win. I'll call it maybe a year of self-realization. I think, like you said, Marvel may not take the hint and go back to the drawing board the way they maybe need to, and look at what made the Marvel movies the earth-shattering events that they were. I do feel like they're coasting, and I think the danger has presented itself as, like we said, Star Wars really hit with the way we were told, you're gonna buy whatever we put out and you're gonna like it, so shut up. And we just showed with Solo that's not the way it's gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that's where we are now with this. It's the same company that made the same mistakes. So this time they have to learn from it. And the thing is, we're not supposed to be discussing the Marvels right now. We're supposed to be discussing Blade, because this is when Blade was supposed to be released originally, but because of its strikes, the whole thing got pushed off. We're supposed to be close to Ironheart. The whole timeline, the cinema timeline, not the Marvel continuity timeline, is all off. And we are getting, as far as I remember, looking at the timeline yesterday, we're getting Echo in January. Now we're not getting anything until the summer. Like, that is a big skip, and that's gonna be a lull. We know what they've produced. We know that there's been a lot of production issues with certain projects they're doing. And if they have that, they have the time now to go back and do it, because, okay, they're going to hemorrhage money, but it's Disney. It's arguably one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world. So you very easily can just throw a bit of extra money at that and give us a decent product that's going to ensure that we're going to go out when we're going to buy the merchandise. We're going to keep buying the Blu-rays instead of streaming them and like casting them off. That the culture is going to return, and we're going to really enjoy seeing what's next with these. And we've got a lot of stuff coming up that's going to be quite solid. Like I said, I'm not too excited for Echo. The character was decent in the comics, but where they're kind of going with a lot of the creative decisions in this doesn't look too promising. But when they start kind of really giving us the A-lister heroes again, I think that's where it's going to take off. And yes, we have to address the rumor that there's talks with some of the previous cast, like you're thinking about bringing Robert Downey Jr. back. Let sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah.
That's that's a cheat. That's a shortcut. That's not what we're looking for. That story's wrapped. If you want to bring back Iron Man, do something different. I mean, in the 90s, they had the young Tony Stark coming in to be like one member of the Avengers, and he had to learn everything fresh. He was the guy, not at the leadership helm. He was learning, or do what they did in the Ultimates, have this like boy genius who just wants to be a superhero as a pastime, who has like I think it was brain cancer he had, and he has a finite amount of time, so he's a frivolous devil may care sort of character. But recast him. Don't hurt what's already happened by just doing a simple cash grab. Go back to the drawing board. Give us a good story. Don't rely on cliches. Don't rely on tropes. Comic books have been one of the most important media storytelling types of the 20th century. Now that we're in the 21st and it's changed medium to the big screen, let's not give up on it so quickly. And I'm not talking to the fans, I'm talking to the studio now in this case. Let's see what made this magical and let's recapture that.
Yeah.
We're in the second generation of superhero movies. And I know people are going to say, well, no, we're in phase 5, phase 4. No, I'm talking about if you look at the X movies, the Blade movies, and the stuff that came before that, which we can pretty much ignore. That had its peak and it dropped, and now it's come back up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Extended Universe. It looks like we're in a bit of a decline again, but I do see it rising back to prominence with its third iteration of comic book movies. And people will then, once the movies are great again, be saying, well, I always stuck with them. I watched all of the crap just because of my fans. Like, we can smell your bullshit from here. But this comes down to Disney's decisions on what they can do to make the whole, universe exciting again, to make it the cultural phenomenon that it deserves to be.
Agree. I think I agree. I don't think this year has been a win. I think if you look at it, we've got 5 projects, and I consider 3 of them I don't care about business success. I only care about my own experience. I've enjoyed 3 of them a lot. I thought Quantumania, I'd consider a draw. There were some positives there. There was a lot that I really didn't like. I hated Secret Invasion. So on balance, that's a win, technically, if you look at that. But also the media narrative and everything around it, and the global conversation is always around 6 months behind the actual content itself. That needs to take time to catch up for the entire planet to see the content to make a judgment of it. I feel like this was a year that if last year Marvel had taken some bullets, and I thought they were really in trouble this time last year, this is the year they stopped the bleeding, but they're still wounded, But the thing that they also have is they have a few bullets in their gun to fire back. They have the X-Men, they've got Fantastic Four, they've got a lot to be positive about, and I feel that they've learned the lessons. They're acknowledging it. It is now public discourse. Their backs against the wall. I don't think it's a bad thing that we're having a long break in between Marvel content. I think they need that. I think they need just to go back to basics, take time. Right, guys, here, mea culpa time, this time next year on Disney Day, mea culpa time. Here's the new roadmap. Here's what we're doing. Here's the vision. Give it, and then bring us back in. And they will. They've got the platform. They're going to be able to do it. They've got the stars. They've got the bullets in the gun. So I'm leaning towards optimistic here, but again, I'm cautious. They've heard us before, but I think I overall I've been happy. They've ended strongly, and I'm in a happy place regarding Marvel here. And part of that is thanks to these conversations with yourself, Dan. So thank you for joining me to discuss all things Marvel this year on page 180, guys. It's not the last. Like, good news though, I can reveal it's not the last. We'll see it, Dan, on page 180 this year. Dan's going to be back in a couple of weeks. We've hinted towards it. We're watching it. We're loving it, but we want to kind of have one big discussion on it. We're going to be discussing all of part 1 of season 2 of Invincible in a couple of weeks, so can't wait to have you back. But Dan, in the meantime, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all the conversations that have helped shape both mine and our listeners and viewers' experience of Marvel this year. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on page 180 as always.